debt is really crushing for college students, especially like we've seen with the job market, and it's how bad unemployment is among college grads. Even when you have experience in prompt engineering and talking to AI and getting the results that you need from AI, it still might be a bunch of AI BS. College entrepreneurship program at ODU taught me is how much a startup is an experiment. It's about learning. So the sophists were, I guess we could call them today, influencers, right? Self-help gurus, very loud, very proud, constantly talking and talking and talking. And you'd kind of forget the whole point of the speech by the end. That is just really like unethical messaging.
Over the last decade, we've gone from movies were the big thing. Then somehow, I think it was actually Kevin Bacon with the show The Following on Fox, big name people started being on series, and then series became the thing, that it wasn't week to week, it was episode to episode. I know that sounds ridiculous, right, but the way that is created is different than saying, okay, this person has to tune back in again in 7 days. Now we have to hook them enough for them that when it says next episode that they stay on. That's an incredibly difficult thing. Now, I don't know if you've seen this, but content is moving back towards kind of scheduled times. Right. And I guess that's because of binge or marathon watching, and they want to elongate that process.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Which is so interesting.
Talk about it at the water cooler for 10 weeks as opposed to 10 minutes.
Right. On one day. And so Stranger Things did that for their 3-part ending over the last few big holidays to end 2025. But it's just very interesting how like that hooking is so incredibly important. And if they can't hook someone, and those things are like the lengths of movies, right? So you're like committing to 3 hours. They break the internet, basically. They've broken their app every single time. So if you logged in to try to watch it on Thanksgiving, completely broke the platform. You could not watch it for like 15 minutes. Then there was this internet debacle, I guess, where people thought there was a hidden episode that was going to come out last week. I don't know if you saw this, Tim.
No.
It did not, but it broke Netflix that night, which is pretty funny. Well, Netflix is their biggest show of all time.
Huh. That's crazy that Netflix is that they still would have some bandwidth issues or just over flooding issues. I mean, because they continue to have big event after big event. That man, that's wild to think.
I wonder if it's one show is the issue, because usually it's broken off. I don't
right.
But just the psychology of how people have changed their thinking over the last decade or so.
Well, it would be interesting to know the data behind that. Because I'm thinking like right now, like I know that the only show that really has me trained in that sense right now is I know Sunday nights I wait for the push notification that Landman has been, the new episode of Landman is available. And we'll watch it Sunday evening.
I remember 10 years ago-ish listening to some piece of content that was like, the way that they're creating is different. And it's just so crazy that maybe we're going back to that.
Everything old becomes new again.
There we go. And I bring that up because as we're talking about comfort and to be familiar with something, today's guest is someone who I can pronounce his first name, absolutely horrendous on the last name, Scrivanich, Luke Scrivanich. Hell of a job by your former journalist right here. Give it to me. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Nice work, Zach.
Thank
Luke,
you.
it's good to see you.
Good to see you too, Tim.
I say this about being comfortable and uncomfortable. And when we were doing a deep dive into your life, we learned about how the world of Stoicism is something that is so meaningful to you. And when people, like, I learned about this, I don't know, 5-7 years ago. I don't know if you followed any of this stuff, Tim, and to the Stoics and stuff like that, but it's quite interesting. Like, how do you frame it, Luke? How do you kind of describe what the Stoics were and how are they made an impact on your life?
Absolutely. So great question, Zach. Good to see you too. But I would say the Stoics started back in ancient Greece, right after Socrates' time. and explosion of philosophy and everything. And basically, they were almost a retaliation to the sophist movement in a sense. So the sophists were, I guess we could call them today, influencers, right? Self-help gurus, very loud, very proud, constantly talking and talking and talking. And you'd kind of forget the whole point of the speech by the end, but the whole point was to make you feel emotion and to kind of get you swept up in these emotions. So you actually forget the logic and reason of it. Whereas the Stoics came on, where Zeno, who was a wealthy trader, lost his ship at sea, lost his entire fortune, and he became washed up, and no joke, no pun intended. And he started the school of Stoicism on the Stoa, the painted porch in Athens. And he basically learned that it was actually a blessing for him to lose everything, and that, to sum it up, Stoicism is, in a sense, how you look at things and which handle you grab life upon. Do you grab it by the victim handle, or do you grab it on the sense of, I can take this and use this to my betterment, to change my circumstances and the circumstances of others?
Man, we came out swinging. That's good stuff.
Thank you.
I'm pondering.
Awesome.
This is my, like, I've read, this is my only book into the Stoics right here. The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Howard, a popular book apparently. But that was powerful, Tim. Like, I feel like I'm done for the day. This is gonna be the shortest
Right?
podcast ever. You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, as I'm just trying to process this not being never knowing where shows go or what we're going to talk about, just trying to process this. But yeah, I mean, I think about all the conversations I've had with founders along the way, and I'm just like, hey, man, every setback, you're sharpening your sword. I mean, it's better to learn these lessons when they're, $100 mistakes or $1,000 mistakes, as opposed to a $100,000 mistake or $1 million mistake. So all this stuff, I guess, what is the cliche that stormy seas create strong sailors? Yeah, so I guess, does that come from that, Luke?
I don't know if it comes from that or not, but it might as well have, right? There's kind of like, there's this other thing, another podcast that I love to listen to is Chris Williamson's podcast, and he talked about this thing called Churchillian drift, where people don't know where a good idea or quote came from, so they just assign, oh, I think it was Churchill who said that, kind of to use that, his reputation to make themselves look wiser. So we might as well approach that as well and say, oh, this is Stoicism drift, right?
Yeah, it's so easy, and I feel like so many people want to take the victim handle. Yeah, I can't do. It's just the easy way.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Easy today and hard tomorrow, right? Hard decisions, hard life, or hard decisions, easy life. Easy decisions, hard life.
Yeah.
Are you guys familiar with like the disc profile, Myers-Briggs, and things like that? Are you familiar with these things? Okay.
Yeah.
So
which one are you guys?
I'm not sure, but on the disc profile, I'm a high ID, if that's what you're asking. I don't know about Myers-Briggs. But I remember the first time I ever took this. Tim, you've taken it?
Yeah.
Luke, have you done one?
Yes, I've done both of them, yeah.
Because on Myers-Briggs, I don't know, I can't, it's INTJ or ENTJ. I am like dead center on the IE aspect. So I always kid, like, I don't know if I'm a introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert, because to me, I have to, once I feel comfortable in my surroundings, then I become very extroverted. But until then, I'm very quiet, watching my surroundings, trying to understand where I am and how to engage.
There's a term for that. It's called I forgot. I'm sorry. Ambivert, maybe? Something like that?
Omnivert.
Omnivert, yeah, which is a tweener. The thing that I thought was really interesting is when I learned what I was, and then I, like, people that I've been working with, I learned what they were. And I was like, this makes a lot of sense. And so when we're talking about that, or we're talking about being stoic and the framework behind that, and then you kind of pair that with one of those IMDb's or the INT, whatever, the DISC profiles and stuff. Is that something that you have a conversation with your other teammates and your co-founders, and because not everyone's into that kind of style? How do you flow with that?
Well, I know my previous life, like that was a training course that we went through. Everybody went through the Myers-Briggs, and then you would take that 2 weeks before the training course, and then the first day of the training course, there would be some random exercise. And what would happen then is that you would break up into groups. And what we did not know at the time is that they grouped everyone based on the results of that test. And then you would watch everyone's behavior as they did this problem solving exercise. And just in terms of like how those groups would come together to solve these problems. Some would take their time to get to know each other. And then once they knew each other, then they would solve the problem. Some people just wait to the very last minute because that's just how they perform better. But it was interesting to watch that. Then knowing the types of people that you're working with, that would allow you to work on projects in a more thoughtful way. It was a pretty cool class.
What about you, Luke?
I did the DISC profile. My actual, like, who I am around my friends and family, like when I'm vulnerable, is actually straight across the board. But when I'm in public, I'm very, like, I think the D for dominant or something, and then very much like analysis driven. So I'm basically like, I don't really care how anyone feels, including myself. It's like we have a job to do, right? But when I'm one-on-one or when I'm being vulnerable, I have much more, like, I guess you could say empathy in a sense. So I'm very, very much driven on that. And then I remember when I did a leadership event out with my fraternity from college, I went out to Indianapolis, and their leadership version was 3 types. And there was, let me think, it was sapphires, rubies, and emeralds. And I was a ruby, which is like the traditional, like dominant, like athletic, competitive. And then we did not get along well with the sapphires, who were like almost like the Simon Sinek, like kind of like very empathetic, like let's build relationships before like we work on this kind of thing. And then the emeralds were just pure analysis, like the scientist of the group. So I thought that was a really cool way to remember, because like you said, like ENTJ, INTJ, DI, something, like it's hard to remember, but when you like attach it to a crystal and it's like who works well with others, like when we got to see in the room, I'm like, you know what? I talked to that guy. He's definitely an emerald. Like, you know what I mean? So that was a really interesting thing I got to do in Indianapolis.
How do you feel about all this, Zach? Do you know what you are?
No. I know I'm an ID on the disc, but that's it. I don't know the other one. But how do I feel about it? I think it's important to know these things when you're talking with individuals or your teammates, or like it just, like from the analytical perspective, it doesn't mean that like someone is looking at this in a bad way. It just means like this is how they look at it, and it's actually a very valuable asset to you if you, as the leader or other teammate, can take that and grasp the concept like, oh, I'm the opposite of that, and I'm good at this one thing, but this other person is badass in that thing, which is what could potentially rise this company to another level. And so I need to like not be so annoyed at that situation, which is what I think originally I had done in most situations. But well, why are they thinking like that? But then when I learned that, I was like, huh. And there's a lot of companies who, no matter the size, will perform one of those tests so that they know exactly where the person is, to see.
How does that work within your startup, Luke? I mean, like, it's interesting because Charlie's an outgoing guy, Chris is an outgoing guy, and then are you good with just sitting back? Did you have to teach yourself to sit back? Or do you guys fight for the mic time, so to speak? How do those dynamics work?
I would say that the dynamics work within our company in the sense of both Charlie and Chris do a really good job at making people feel something. And then I think I'm able to reel it back in to a sense of how actionable, how can we operationalize this? How doable is this? And like, what are the next steps forward? So I think that first off, we have not like compared these profiles before, which absolutely should, because of how much insight we can get from it. I'm actually about to start learning about ikigai, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's like the Japanese term for finding purpose in life. And I read about this wonderful thing. I'm taking this slightly different direction for a second, but basically this famous business manager in Japan, what he would do is he would do visible impacts ikigai, and instead of giving cash bonuses or raises, every single employee, every single person in the organization would have a visible impact of saying like, you reduce, you solve this many bugs in the software, you reduced this many issues, like you sped up the process this much, this is how many features you developed, not tied to money, right? Just tied to the impact you had in the company. And he put it on a leaderboard, and every week, all of the employees would be working overtime and working more hard and really be involved because they had a sense of purpose, because they could see their impact, right? So I think, yes, the personalities are absolutely valuable and absolutely they should be taken into consideration. But the key unlock for me is finding things like that system I explained and other ways of like, where's your passion and how can we unlock that to truly like take you to the next level? Because once that happens, you're working with whoever you want to, even if you didn't initially want to work with them, because you're like, I'm on a mission, let's go.
Yeah, and part of the reason that I asked the question is just in the sense of like, for me personally, I'm the type of guy that I'm like, man, I don't really need to be the face. I don't need to be the spokesperson. I'm just going to let the actions do all the speaking for me. But then what I realized pretty quickly, and through others mentoring me, so to speak, was like, no, you got to be the face. You got to be the person talking. And if you're not constantly push, talking, like the likelihood of people noticing that becomes greatly reduced. So that was like super. It's still somewhat difficult for me, just because like I'm just not the guy like, pay attention to me because whatever. And I think that you seem fairly similar in that regard.
No,
It's a big,
absolutely. And yeah, I think but honestly, like I've seen that one of the contributing like success factors, this is from a Sam Altman video I saw for Y Combinator, is that one of the key indicators of success for founders was how evangelical they were about their startup mission, right? So if you had a team of founders who they just couldn't stop talking about, it, they couldn't stop thinking about it, their success would absolutely skyrocket. So I
Yeah,
wasn't like that, not because I wasn't thinking about it, but just because I was like, if you don't seem interested in what I have to say, I'm not going to like, I like talking to people who get it. You know what I mean? Which
yeah,
is why I'm on operations and on the inside of this, and not what I originally started as chief growth officer and then switched to operations for us, because I love like building the team, unlocking each person's sense of purpose, and then pushing it forward. So I'm with you, Tim. Definitely, like I prefer to keep to myself, but I've got to realize like, hey, if you want to accomplish this, then you're gonna have to step out of your comfort zone.
Zach, you look like you had something to add to that.
I just want to know if it was because your entire life people told you, Tim, that you had a face for radio. I hate that line when people say that. I don't know why I
Yeah,
said it, but
I think
that's what I was thinking.
I mean, the thing for me really is just like, I don't know. I just don't like fighting. I don't like fighting for attention. And it's just like I don't know. That's just typically if I have to fight for, or if I feel like I have to fight for someone's attention, then I'm just that's when I just kind of like, if you value me as important enough, then you'll you'll stop and listen. And
But
that's
maybe
not
people
what I
don't know you
can.
enough, to value you enough, which is why you need to be louder
Right.
in that situation. I mean, it's all a cycle,
It's
right?
yeah. And do it in a way that doesn't sound braggadocious.
Which is a
Right.
very difficult task, right?
Yeah.
But I always think back to the hit commercial for, I I think it's for throat lozenge, Ricola, where they want people, they go to the top of the mountain and it's like, okay, if you want to know, and you go, Ricola. Like, as ridiculous as that is, I don't know if you ever seen it, Luke, but like, that's them telling people like, this is the thing, right? And it's like, oh, that's interesting. And so I think some of it is our grooming too, like what we consumed growing up or who we listened to, nowadays. But I'm of the opinion that loud is important. But I also respect and appreciate and can understand many, many companies who are not vocally loud, but are still badass businesses that have.
But you think about it in the sense of, I was listening to a podcast earlier this week, and it was interesting in the sense of like, hey, everybody knew the CEO or knows the CEO of Apple. Who's the CEO of Samsung? And it's just like, nobody would know.
You knew before, you might not know now, but it's a great point, right? Oftentimes, the loudest company is the one that you know the most about, good or bad.
And granted, Tim Cook is not as outspoken as a Steve Jobs was, but like, there's no doubt about it. Same deal when it comes to could you name a CEO of any other car company than Elon? Probably not.
You would be the only one that I could think of, right? Yeah. I mean, Walmart, some might know him, but it's a great point. Yeah. You don't know these companies.
Yeah.
All right. So you're on the campus of Old Dominion University at some point over the last decade, and you just have like this entrepreneurial itch. Did you like, how did you get into like knowing that starting a business was something that you wanted? Because is that why you went to school there? Like how did the whole thing, like Luke the entrepreneur, become a thing?
So it's a combination of things. I wasn't the person with like the lemonade stand. I just thought that you wouldn't make enough money selling lemonade, but I wasn't the person who always had like selling candy to my classmates. Like, I don't have that story for you, like entrepreneur since birth. But one of my earliest memories is like, I remember having an invention notebook, right? And I would write down and drew like sketch and diagrams for all of these inventions I came up with. A lot of them were science fiction and stuff. But I just remember that and like thinking how cool it would be to be the person who invented something that would change the course of history. So that was my youngest memory. And then flash forward, I started my car detailing business when I was 19 or 18 or 19, finishing up high school, diploma detailing for my degree, right? To get some cash. And I had some other of my friends from high school working for me and did that for 2 or 3 years. And then started getting into internships and more professional jobs in the sense, so that kind of faded away. But when I originally went to ODU, I applied for William & Mary and UVA and ODU. The other two just because my parents pushed me to. They're like, no, like you have to. We saved up this college plan. Like ODU it's not good enough. It doesn't cost enough. Like we have this college plan. I was like, I want to go to ODU. They have an entrepreneurship minor. It's close to home. And I just like, that's just what I want. So I actually accepted ODU before I heard back from the other two. Didn't get into them, but still accepted ODU. And my original plan was to get my bachelor's degree, go be a commercial pilot for United Delta or so, work for a couple of years, and then take a loan out to get my own private jet so that I could fly people around in private jets and then hire other pilots and other jets and basically have a fleet of private jets. I ended up taking like Wall Street 101 and like then I was like, what if I had my own, investment fund? And then I eventually settled on something with AI and then met Charlie and it all kind of fell together. And the reason I'm the first entrepreneurship major, because remember, I went for the minor. The major didn't exist. One of my friends from my fraternity, he took the entrepreneurship class before I did, and the professor said the major's coming out. And I said, that sounds like a strategic connection to make. So I met her. We really got along, Dr. Karen Eagle, who runs Entrepreneurship Major. And I said, can you please set me up so I'm ready to take the major? So I took the classes for the major before it was a major. So then when it was released, one semester before I graduated, I was able to finish with that. and obviously met Charlie in my senior year, and the rest is history.
Wow. Did you grow up in Hampton Roads?
Yes, I was born in Virginia Beach, and when I was 2, my parents moved out to Smithfield, Virginia, which, whether you say Smithfield's Hampton Roads or not, I have so many memories of Virginia Beach. My great-grandmother lived over there and like right by the Neptune statue at the ocean front. So I still consider being raised in Hampton Roads, whether you say Smithfield is or not.
No, I think Smithfield is certainly part of Hampton Roads.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. And how did you get hooked into Colab? You were an intern?
No, I wasn't. So, but I did. Well, that's not entirely true. I got an internship credits. I got college credits for working on my business here with Charlie because I got into startup studios. So I went to Dr. Eagle and I said, hey, like you said I could get an entrepreneurship internship. What if I just worked for myself? So that's kind of what I did. But no, a year before that, I got on to be the treasurer of Enactus Social Entrepreneurship Club at ODU. And I, like I said, I really want to build an entrepreneurial community at ODU. And then I later, like I'd met Chris Hively, co-founder of MapQuest, read his book about entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And I said, you know who could help me with this and give me great insight is the person who runs Colab. So I set up a meeting with Paul Nolde, and one of the first things he told me is like, you've got to talk to Charlie. And I got to have a great meeting with Paul, got great insight from him that I was able to take back to the club. And then 2 or 3 months later, Charlie and I decided to go into business together. And then ever since then, like I said, I got into the Startup Studios incubator, and I'm here right now. I'm in the recording studio at Assembly off of Granby Street in Norfolk. So I just love it. It feels like a little slice of Silicon Valley over here in Hampton Roads. And yeah, the rest is history.
What are your just general thoughts on college entrepreneurship programs? Are they really preparing you? Is Old Dominion better or worse in that situation? Like where, like what is, because I let me put a little preface to this. So what's the actual school called? It's the one at ODU, Strom. When they opened the Strom Center, back in like 2012, 2013, I remember, I don't even know that I knew you, or at least not well yet, Tim. I went with ODU to Babson College in Boston area, and great program. Loved what we were able to see up there. And I remember having a conversation with someone pretty high up at the university. I don't recall exactly who they were, but I was like, so what do you do when someone leaves school before they graduate because this has prepared them? And I don't think they were ready for that answer. And so, you know, that's like when I think of like schools and preparing you and stuff like that, that's what I lean towards. So what are your just general thoughts on schools and entrepreneurship and ODU and how that's, you know, prepared you or didn't or whatever?
I think that first off, take maybe the controversial route first, and then I'll smooth it out with the smoother stuff at the end. But I think that debt is really crushing for college students, especially like we've seen with the job market, and it's how bad unemployment is among college grads. And if you know what you want out of your life, I say go get the degree. What I don't like is when 17, 18, 19-year-olds are sold on this idea of like, if you want to be anything in life, you have to go to college. So then they spend 3, 4, 5 years racking up this mountain of debt to find out what they want. And then they can't even get a job with that major, right? And they might not even use the major. So I think that is just really like unethical messaging. And I think that I'd love to see society kind of take a step back and say like, okay, yes, if you want to be a lawyer, like you got to go to college. If you want to, you know, work in investment banking, if you want to be a doctor, right? But to be an entrepreneur, you don't need a degree. What happened with me is I was able to get a full ride. So I was very blessed with that. And my parents had the college plan saved up. So I was very blessed with that. But I would say if you know that you want to be an entrepreneur and you can get the financial aid where you're not maybe passing 40, 50,000 in debt, not some absorbent amount that's going to haunt you for the rest of your life, I believe that it's absolutely worth it. So that's my first take on college, is like, do it if you know that's what your life requires. Don't just go to university kind of figuring things out unless you can have it paid for, because it is a great experience. And then I'd say how it prepared me is something like, I'm listening to Lean Startup right now, the audiobook, and I didn't realize this. I graduated in May, so it's almost been a year, right, that I didn't realize this. But what the college entrepreneurship program at ODU taught me is how much a startup is an experiment. It's about learning, right? I think there's a huge misconception that a startup is this, it's the only way to make money, it's the only way to be successful, and like you do that in a year or 2 or 3 years, you're good. What it is it's an experiment. You come up with a hypothesis, think about the competitions, think about the problem, think about your target market, and then you're constantly learning, right? If you're not learning, you're dying. And that's what ODU taught me, such as with the capstone, where we started a business and then pitched to like angel investors at the end of the semester. So I think that the problem that I have seen with some other people who are pursuing entrepreneurship who are not in college is they're just like, there's the dollar, let me run after that. There's the dollar, let me run after that. Whereas this can still happen with college grads, but the people who have studied entrepreneurship along with me are not just like, let me just have that shiny object syndrome of the dollar, versus let me have this experimentation, this process to find out how is the best way that I can drive the most amount of value, and the money comes as a byproduct of that.
Luke, what year did you graduate?
May 2025. So what is that, 8-9 months ago?
Yeah. So I'm just curious. Have you found people in your graduating class? Is it difficult for them to find their first gig, their first employment opportunity?
Absolutely. I mean, I can't tell you how many people that I considered either competition to me or my equals in some part, right? And they spent 4 or 5 months driving for DoorDash. And it's
Yeah.
their GPAs were over 3.0. They had an internship or 2 or 3. And it was just so dreadful, right? And
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Is there
that's
good money in that though? I'm honestly asking, like, because you see these people who used to do other jobs who now drive, and I'm like, is that a comparable?
Well,
Like, good?
I think that that's a work-life balance kind of thing.
Oh.
That's what people choose. But and the reason I asked Luke the question I did is just because I know with my daughter and with her, she graduated also in May of 25, and like everyone from that school it's the same situation. That it's very, very difficult for them to find their first job post graduation. And then like from that standpoint, yes, it just seems like there's going to be many more people like you, Luke, in terms of like, man, I'm going to start my own job, and I'm going to become or start my own company. I'm going to become an entrepreneur and just figure things out that way. So I see there being a spike in entrepreneurship.
I think I got lucky when I left school. I took the summer off. I coached a swim team because I had already made that agreement that I was going to do that. Had a great time doing that. And then, but I was still like applying to jobs. And by the time May to August, I think I got my job in TV, whatever. But I got lucky because I had a tie to Morgantown. I had a tie to West Virginia. Are they going after the alumni effect? Like, do you see your daughter going after, like, is she going after JMU focused companies where she could do that? Like, that's what worked for me. And I feel like people are buying the network.
Yeah.
But they don't realize that. So like to Luke, you talked about, a startup is an experiment and ODU provided you that. To me, you're buying the alumni network. And so anytime someone, went to that school, that's a tie that you can merge into there. Should do it better. But
I think that it's interesting from that standpoint because you had that was an established major at West Virginia and it had a strong time. Like William & Mary Business School, like there's a strong alumni network there, but I'm sure like if Luke, from your standpoint, that being a brand new major right out of the gate, you probably can leverage the alumni network of Old Dominion as a whole, but not necessarily like, hey, we have all these founders that we've created that are, X number of unicorns. Let me reach out to them. Yeah, that wasn't there yet.
So yes and no, because I'm actually getting into the entrepreneurial alumni network of ODU. So the alumni foundation, alumni group of ODU, there's now a new group for entrepreneurs. So obviously I'm the first major, but there's people like Greg Tomczyk from Valor Cybersecurity. He's actually running that, and he's connecting to people all over, like Dennis Murphy with Priority Automotive. So a lot of really big influential people. So yes, I think there is that connection. I'm happy to be welcomed into that group as the youngest, basically, of the Entrepreneurial Alumni Network at ODU. But yeah, no, the major is like, I definitely paved the way in that sense. And I just can't wait to see how many people take it up after. And I 100% want the Slack, the group chat, the close network, right? Founders got to stick together.
Well,
You're
the
the
other thing
youngest
that's
now, but you won't be soon.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that's interesting is that, like, back in the day, there wasn't the resources that are in place now. And so like now, especially with the power of AI, yeah, you don't necessarily need when I went through business school, that gave me the confidence that I needed. I'm like, yeah, I can totally do this. I'm never going to be a CPA, but I know how to read different financial statements and I know what to do with that. But so it gave me the confidence that I could start my own business. And now with AI, I mean, you just set the curriculum that you want to learn and then let it do its thing. So it's just like, you don't even need to go to school really anymore for that confidence aspect, because everything is right there at your fingertips and you can learn anything you want to learn.
Absolutely. That's right. And tying it back to what you said earlier about a lot of people, moving into an entrepreneur position. And like, what did Chris say last week? 1 in 4 Gen Z is doing something entrepreneurial, even if it's just an independent contractor for DoorDash or something. But 100%, what Logentiq is positioning itself for, like the long-term vision, and Logentiq's my company, is to basically capture this new labor trend. We think back into the past, a lot of people working on the family farm, working at the corner store, working at like this small businesses, right? And then we had Industrial Revolution, we had Henry Ford with the assembly line, we had people flooding into cities, and then we had to build suburbs. So we had a natural progression of labor, just people working, into big companies. And now with how many mass layoffs and job market and everything else, we're seeing a transition into more of an entrepreneurial focused labor market. And that's what Logentiq is hoping to with our first product, Clairvoya.
And give us the quick rundown of Clairvoya, what that does for those people and some of the problems that solves.
Absolutely. So Clairvoya is a startup strategic planning and execution platform. So what's going to happen is that when you're a user and you come onto the platform, you talk with our chatbot, Clairvoya, and it asks you questions about your goal over the next 90 days, such as your startup idea, so you can start experimenting and learning. If you already have a business, it takes that into effect too. It matches the level of like jargon proficiency you have, so experienced users can use this, or just aspiring entrepreneurs in college. And the output of it is a 90-day structured roadmap that takes you from where you are today, and clairvoyance clearly shows you the path to where you're going in 90 days. It makes the work sized into action items that are about 1 hour to complete each. And those action items, those 1 hour increments, fit into your schedule, because some of the questions it asks you is, how many hours do you have to work on this? You have 10 hours to work on this on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Let me fit that into your calendar. So time block it, right? Hold you accountable. And then we're also working on a prioritization feature where the action items you do have, the work you have to do, is in one click. It prioritizes what is the most important thing I have to do today. The last thing I'll say is with Clairvoya, okay, you have your goal. It's all mapped out. You have your action items on how to achieve your goal one step at a time. we created the assist with AI and do with AI features. And what those do is assist with AI takes the action item, reads all of the context from your business and your goal, and it breaks it down into steps and lets you know how to do what you need to do. And you can talk to it just like you would talk to a ChatGPT and other LLM. Do with AI, what happens is every time a task, an action item is created, in the back end, we run a filter to see whether or not this action item can be accomplished by an LLM. If it can be, write an email, make a strategic report, create a poem. Think about all of those things that LLMs can do end to end. You're able to do it with AI. So in one click, in 10 to 20 seconds, it takes all of the context from your business and uses prompt engineering to return the output to you. And that's important because even when you have experience in prompt engineering and talking to AI and getting the results that you need from AI, it still might be a bunch of AI BS. It still might be all over the place. It's not contextually aware. It's not you. It's not your business. So we've removed the need for prompt engineering in form of execution for startups.
How does it learn that logic? Like, so that you don't need to use prompt engineering?
So I'll give a quick prompt engineering lesson, which answers your question, Tim. So what I like to say is people tackle challenges achieving real excellence. So P, persona. You are an expert marketer. Help me come up with a social media marketing plan. Persona. T, task. Help me create this 12-week plan with action items, right? Persona, task, context. This is the business I'm in. This is how much money I have. This is what I've done before. This is what works. This doesn't. Next is attachments, right? Any docs, PDFs, anything I can upload. People tackle challenges achieving real. Then R is restraints, or you could say constraints, as in make it 500 words. Make it make this poem in the style of William Shakespeare, right? How do you want it to perform, and how can we limit the output so it doesn't give you too much or too little? And then finally, example. You can say, this is an example of the output I'm actually looking for. Go ahead and do this. So that's my acronym for you. And what it does is that it reads the action item, your milestone, your project, your entire goal, and it answers those questions and pre-fills that on the back end. So that when you click on do with AI or assist with AI, it already has everything contextually. It's contextually aware, and it has everything in order to accomplish your task.
And then from like a coaching standpoint, will it challenge you? Will it like, hey, if you consider this, or, if you just do, one more, this task, it will add this much whatever validity to your project. Like, is there that aspect yet, or is that something that will be forthcoming? Like, how does it continue to push, if that makes sense?
Right. I like that push. So we have a definition of ready built into it. So if you ask it to basically, take these financial statements and organize them and basically find anything that might be incorrect that my CPA didn't catch. Well, if you didn't upload those yet, it's going to hit you with definition of ready. So I cannot accomplish this yet. I'll give you a template, but I can't accomplish it yet. So the way in which it pushes you and kind of has you coaching and saying like, okay, I know that's what you want to accomplish. You want that $1 million in venture capital fundraising, but we have some prerequisites to meet, right? Let's create some action items to get those done so we can accomplish your goal.
That's cool. So I have to ask, one of the things that's that Luke does, which is very, very unique, is they operate in sprints. How long does each sprint last? About a week, 10 days?
Yeah, we just do Monday through Friday, a week. And then obviously if there's any work that went over, we'll knock it out on the weekend. But traditionally the sprints, right, Scrum sprints, and I'm not certified in Scrum. I kind of learned about it. Charlie is. I learned about it from him. I learned about it on my own, and I adopted it to meet our needs. But basically what you do is some principles of Scrum in project management and software and other things is that you take your product backlog, you say, okay, this is everything the company has to accomplish. This is what we have to build in the software. And you prioritize it, right? You pick a couple of those features to fix or bugs to resolve. And you say, this is what we're doing this week, right? And you'll have stretch goals. Like if we hit it ahead of time, we can do these. And then there's always a sprint reflection at the end of the week. How did we do? Good, positive, like are good, that went well, this we can do again, or negatives, right? So I'm getting into a bit how I do it a little bit differently. So the way I do it is that on Friday, I go through the entire action items for across our company because we have Charlie, myself, Chris, and then we have 2 interns and another advisor as well, all from ODU. So really building up an ODU army over here. But I look at everyone's action items and I write down the big wins, which happen to go into an advisor update that some people may or may not receive.
Well, this is where I'm going with all this. So continue on, Luke.
Yeah, absolutely. So we take all the action items, I pick the biggest wins, I put those into the advisor update, and I say, okay, that's where that went wrong. This is where this went wrong. Such as one of the times I didn't set my work schedule, and then things with family kind of took my time away, and it caused me to miss a couple action items. And that hasn't happened again because I notated that, I told the team how I messed up, and I held myself accountable as well as, and they did as well. And then every morning at 9 a.m., I send everyone's action items, right? Prioritized. This is the most important thing to do. After you're done with that, knock out this, knock out this, knock out this. So every morning, that is basically our morning call is usually 15 minutes if you do it in person. I just send out the action items. And then every day, as operations manager, I follow up with each one of my team and I say, how was your day? How are you doing? How are you feeling today? Check in on them personally, and then say, okay, did you get this done? And if they didn't get it done, did you know what to do? Did you know why you're doing it? Did you know how to do it? Was there anything blocking you? And did you want to do it? That's the last one a lot of managers forget. Did I instill enough motivation in them to get the task done? So that's the day-to-day. And then on Fridays, we do our sprint reflection. We celebrate, we give claps, we give cheers. If there's a big win, we do a victory lap and run around the office downstairs. And then at the end of that, we basically plan out the next week and put the action items down for Monday and go from there.
And I am fortunate enough to get the update. And so is that something that you generate, or is that something that the Clairvoya does? You hit a button, AI just generates that. Yeah. How does that come
absolutely.
about?
So today I'm doing that myself, just like writing them down in a Google Doc and then taking like writing down the wins, because the action item complete doesn't say like, why is that a big deal? So
Yep.
I write them down myself and then I just like, hey, make this into a succinct advisor update. So I do that myself. But right now, Clairvoya just makes your first week's action items for your 90-day goal. What we're developing, though, is that your next week, because every week is different, every week you have different availability, even if it's only slightly, we're going to be doing creating a feature where it does that sprint reflection for you. It reads last week's action items, moves over the action items that are not complete over into the next week. Like we're on sprint 11 right now. Next week will be sprint 12. And then creates more action items for you. So I am Clairvoya right now, but soon I won't have to do
No, I think it's great. And I appreciate the fact that you're building in public, so to speak, even though that you're not pushing that out on social media or whatever, but you're sharing with what you're doing. You're holding yourself accountable. And there's big benefits when you're building in public, especially when if you think that you're gonna have to raise money, or when it comes to your first customers coming, your additional customers coming on board. You hit that certain point, then it's like, hey, we're open, come on in. So I appreciate the how forthcoming you are and the fact that you are building in public.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to go back to one thing you said, Tim. It was like, I think you said, what is Clairvoya and what problems does it solve? Well, I got to jump into everything about it, but very succinctly, the 2 problems that it solves is that as a startup entrepreneur or aspiring entrepreneur, You have these incredible genius ideas in your head, but they're not operationalized. They're not fit into your calendar. So it takes your vision and it puts it into reality. That's the first problem it solves. The second problem is what we talked about with the context, with AIBS and everything, not being contextually aware. Prompt engineering is a huge unlock. It's like, I believe it's the best skill of the future until Clairvoya, of course, where it removes the need for prompt engineering. So the second problem it solves is if you are tired of AI giving you tasks that don't actually accomplish anything, and if you're tired of results from AI that do not know you, do not know your business, and are basically not valuable. So those are the two, those are the two problems Clairvoya solves: taking your vision to reality, operationalizing it and fitting it into when you can work, and actually getting measurable and impactful results from AI.
Over the last 12, 18, 24 months, when it comes to robots, the big word is probably agents.
Mm.
Do you still think that that's the future? How do you describe agents to people? Obviously, it sounds like a lot of what you guys are doing is agent based. Like how do you walk through that? What's an AI agent?
Absolutely. So an AI agent, simply because everyone, this is a lot of different definitions, but I'll share with you Logentiq's definition of an AI agent. An agent is an LLM based, right? So we know ChatGPT, Gemini, and everything. It's a persona, a system prompt saying, this is who you are and this is what you do. Then it's a task. So this is the job you have to do. You are a business consultant for startup entrepreneurs, helping them coach them for a strategic plan. Excuse me. This is Clairvoya's system prompt I'm reading to you. Here's the task, right? And that's when the user talks to Clairvoya. Next is context. Clairvoya is asking questions to get more context about your business and the whole picture. And then finally is tools. That's the big unlock to an agent. Because these other four, an LLM, a persona, a task, and context, that's just a really good chatbot. But an agent uses software tools to actually accomplish things. So an agent might go onto your Google Calendar and create a booking link, create an event, or change it. Might go onto your Gmail, read the emails, draft a reply, and send it. Might go to your QuickBooks and analyze your financials, go through Slack. Anything that you can think about online that you do yourself, click, 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 that's what an agent is going to be able to do.
Are you LLM agnostic, or you bolt on to ChatGPT? How's your product worked?
Yeah, we really like ChatGPT. That's my favorite one, but we are using OpenRouter, and OpenRouter actually allows you, this is another software that we have an API to. OpenRouter understands the task that it's been given, and then it picks the best LLM to accomplish the task, and then it uses that one. It calls that LLM. So it's like an API of APIs.
Interesting.
Is
So
Clairvoya,
go ahead.
Is Clairvoya the thing that you guys have been building the entire time? I feel like it was a little different before, maybe not named. Is this the product that you guys been
Yeah.
working on?
So when Charlie and Chris and I came together, this is what the delegation of tasks to AI agents, breaking them down. That's what we founded the company on. It did not look or anything or feel like Clairvoya does today, right? Our first iteration of this. But what we did was, as all startups do, is we pivoted twice there. We took a consulting approach just to basically build up some funds and everything. Didn't have too much success with that. Then we built a prompt engineering chatbot, which does what I told you, the do with AI feature, but it was the purpose of making it educational. It teaches people how to use prompt engineering. And then we again pivoted back to our original idea of what Clairvoya is. So we really, and now in full circle, we're doing consulting now, such as our Eris offer, which is the AI Rapid Impact Study. It's for small to medium-sized businesses. It's a tech health assessment where we basically scope out what are the best ways that you can implement AI into your business. So to answer your question, yes, we founded the company off of that. Yes, we pivoted twice, but now we finally hit our stride.
Who comes up with all these acronyms?
So Chris named the company Logentiq. It's a combination, right, of logic and such as reasoning and everything, stoicism, computer reasoning, agentic, obviously, and then the IQ is basically, not that we're big into IQ tests. I haven't taken one myself. I'm interested to hear if you guys have, but just basically saying like humans really are intelligence, like IQ for intelligence, and we want to unlock that. So he came up with Logentiq, as well as Iris for sure, and then Charlie came up with Clairvoya, as in clairvoyance, but he actually got that from a small game called Skyrim. And in Skyrim, there is a spell called clairvoyance where whatever your quest objective is, you cast this spell and a ray of light appears on the ground and it shows you exactly where you're going.
I've not taken an IQ test. Don't need to pass something that you know is not going to go well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I've not either.
Something that I learned last week that I didn't know is that Chris has taken a lower role, I guess. I can't remember the way he articulated it, but just the challenge and you guys going through that, obviously was 3 of you guys to start. How, as a founder, did you work through maybe those challenges when he was there a lot more and now he's not? Like, how'd you guys go through that?
Yeah, so I think he filled it in, so definitely check out his episode if you haven't. But basically, what happened is that as the company got more and more momentum, and I've been full-time, and then Charlie's still working at Collab, so he's been part-time, and Chris is part-time. Chris got so many great opportunities with his government relations and his consulting business, and then like additions on his house he mentioned, and family things, and he basically came to us and he said, guys, I love this mission. I want to be involved in it, but I cannot operationally like commit the amount of like hours into this that you guys deserve. So I'm going to step down and be the chief strategic advisor and still co-founder, of course, give you guys all the introductions, sell anything that helps push the mission forward. But I think that what's happening is that you guys have such great ideas and so much momentum, but I'm in this conference and I'm talking to these clients and I'm traveling all over the place that you guys don't hear back from me for, maybe 24 hours or so on something as simple as an email. So he basically said, I don't want to be any kind of bottleneck whatsoever. So I'm going to step into a position that actually accelerates the company more. And that's what we've seen, right? And I will say it was very, of course, very sad and disappointing because we love working with Chris and love seeing him more and more. And I just got to go out there to the Peninsula Chamber to see him, and it was a great meeting. So I would say it was bittersweet. I want to say sad. It was bittersweet. Of course, like we knew we wouldn't get to see him as much as we had last year, but we also knew that when we saw him, he'd be 100%. He'd be pushing the company forward, and that he was just like really trusting us to run this whole thing that he had put time and money into. So we felt like a lot of belief in ourselves from how he handled it.
Where are you at? Where are you at right now? Are you open to bringing on new customers? How do people get in contact with you? Where are you at?
Absolutely. So yeah, we are in our alpha phase right now. So there's alpha, beta, and then just the product. And what we're doing is the base plan is $5 a month, so bank shattering. And then the pro plan is kind of like the standard subscription, $20 a month. We're at Logentiq.com, and then Clairvoya is right there. And then there's also a link to Clairvoya. You can see that on Logentiq.com, and we're also on LinkedIn. So we are open to alpha users who want to help to shape the direction of this product. We're looking for operations managers, such as myself, but also aspiring entrepreneurs and startup entrepreneurs who are new in their journey, right? Helping find out their plans. And then the last thing I'd say is like mention the consulting agreement era. So if you are a small to medium-sized business who knows they want to adopt AI, but just can't figure out the best way to get the bang for your buck, the investment, then we would love to talk with you, do an AI readiness assessment, a tech health assessment, and give you the project that actually pushes your business forward.
All right. We're going to round it out. I thought you had a different question, Zach, but we can go into
I can ask another question. I got like 16, but this is a 60-minute show. We got.
Yeah.
No, let's just say that I'll frame it a little differently since you were born and raised here in Hampton Roads. If you were to leave, they bring you into Silicon Valley, you relocate. Is there a food that you would miss greatly, or as soon as you got back from Silicon Valley, that would be your first stop that you would have to have?
Wow, I've been eating like way too much Chipotle for this question. Like, like way too much fast casual food. I would say, let me think about. So you said, maybe a local restaurant that I really enjoy. I like Beach Pub out there in Virginia Beach by the ocean front, because I mentioned my great grandmother grew up out there a lot on the ocean front, and we'd always go there, and they'd get like a whole pound of steamed shrimp for really cheap, like half off on like Mondays or something. Different deal now, of course, but I would say I would go to Beach Pub first, because that was a bit of my childhood and nostalgia, and I love seafood too.
When you're far away in Smithfield, which isn't a part of Hampton Roads, and you travel in the long trek to Virginia Beach, get a Beach Pub to get that big, bold bowl of, what'd you say? Shrimp?
Steamed shrimp, yeah.
Shrimp.
Whole
Little
pound.
cocktail, bring it in, no white
What
sauce.
did the robot say? What's the food?
The robot said seafood.
Mm-hmm.
A collection of seafood, which I think you could say that over the last few years, when we've asked this question, the cornucopia of answers has been probably more towards the collection of seafood available on the fine streets of the 757. And no white sauce from the Mexican place. You can't get white sauce at Chipotle either. But you can get your protein bowl there now. Kudos to them for that.
Dude, did you see? I saw a commercial yesterday watching that Starbucks is they're moving away from sugar to the protein road, huh? Is that new?
Are they no longer doing anything sugary, or they're just?
Well, I don't know, but the commercial I saw was really hitting home that
yeah. I think
protein
everything.
Coffees.
Yeah. I think everything has some sort of like adjusted protein aspect to it. Whether or not it really, Pop-Tarts is now putting in something.
Well, I know, dude. It's so funny you say that. I mean, I was in the local Food Lion, and my wife Terry was showing me like the cereal aisle, and now everything is like everyone took Magic Spoon's path, and everything is protein in the cereal aisle.
Absolutely. I got a tropical smoothie, did the same thing. They got the Chobani Greek yogurt smoothies now too. But I'm not complaining. I think
if you can manipulate your diet, your food into a little bit more protein rather than the other stuff that has potentially been in the inner aisles of a grocery store, I think that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Not a dietitian, but I acted like one on TV today. So here we are.
And you wear a Whoop.
Which means, I just like to spend money. Luke, appreciate your time. This has been absolutely wonderful. You're probably the first or second guest to ever wear a tie on the show. I was probably the first one, to be honest, because I believe I wore a tie the very first episode. Don't think we've probably seen someone since, so it took 392 episodes to get to it. It's been absolutely fascinating. Appreciate your thoughts on the Stoics, on business, and whether or not Smithfield is a part of Hampton Roads. Like that. And appreciate your time. Tim, final thoughts?
No, appreciate it, Luke. Always fun. For everyone listening, like, comment, subscribe, leave us a review. all that stuff that helps. We would greatly appreciate it. So thanks so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
And if you guys want to see Tim talk more, get to the top of the mountaintop, and be a part of a Ricola commercial, stay tuned for more. Peace.